switches is on, the red light appears. Seeing it again.
All right, so thank you very much for coming here and joining us for our press conference on the importance of food systems in tackling the climate crisis and global injustice. My name is Max Weiss from the Plant-Based Treaty Initiative, and we have a very exciting board of speakers today. First, joining us from Mexico is Xananine Calvillo. She's a community organizer, water and climate justice activist, and founder of the youth-led grassroots organization La Tlacuacha Compartida, and also a plant-based food system advocate at ProVeg International Youth Board. Then joining us from Denmark is Esben Sloth. He's the director of campaigns at World Animal Protection Denmark, and he will be presenting their latest campaign on the impacts of industrial farming and the biggest culprits in this dirty business. And then our very own Tim Werner from Germany. Tim is a Plant-Based Treaty Germany campaigner and scientific advisor, and he's been campaigning for animal and climate justice for the last 5 years. So, today's press conference, is all about urgency. As most of you probably also feel this strong lack of urgency at these kind of conferences, we just want to present some of the latest very disturbing data. Some of you might have already seen it. So we see these very worrying trends in sea ice depletion in the Antarctic. It's deep winter down there almost, and the ice is still melting. And we have same very extreme trends, for example, when we look at global ocean temperatures, but also it seems like tipping points on land are around the corner. This is a tweet from Dr. Peter Kalmus. He's a very famous scientist at NASA and also climate activist. And at a meeting recently, experts on tropical rainforests told him that they think the Amazon is already past its tipping point and beyond saving. As we all know, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest is largely driven, more than 90% actually of its destruction is driven by animal agriculture. So Tim is here to tell us a little bit more about the state of our planet, and he will be using the concept of planetary boundaries. Tim, how bad is it?
Thank you. Yeah, it's very bad. As you can see, the planetary boundaries, they were, it's a concept from the Stockholm Resilience Center, set up by Johan Rockström and his colleagues. And as you can see, we have 9 planetary boundaries defined, and 6 are already exceeding the safe operating space. So as long as we stay inside this green circle, we can expect to to not destroy our livelihoods. And as we are exceeding these boundaries, the longer we exceed them, the higher the risk that we face an imminent collapse. Our message is addressing only fossil fuels, like most talks here in this conference are, focused around fossil fuels, means ignoring most of these planetary boundaries that are critical for our survival. We don't have much time, so I rush you through, but there's a lot of details to be talked about. As you can see, climate change or global warming on top is not even the biggest risk we are facing, and it's driven, of course, mainly by emissions of fossil fuels. And the second most, or the second biggest emitter is agriculture, and in this space of agriculture, animal agriculture is the main cause for greenhouse gas emissions. Biosphere integrity means the extinction of species, and again, there is a tipping point, very imminent, but it's not calculable. You can never know when these species go extinct that are vital for the biosphere. So we never know if tomorrow there's an animal species going extinct and a collapse occurs. Land use change is the main cause for species extinction, and animal agriculture is, again, the factor that's most important for land use change. Then we have the third planetary boundary, that's land use change again. It's like destruction of ecosystems, and as we talk about it, we always need to think about that's not only land that's changed, but it's also indigenous land that belongs to people and belongs to wildlife, and we destroy it mostly to produce animal products. Novel entities, it's a planetary boundary. It's about chemical compounds we humans create and put out in the world, like, for example, antibiotics and pesticides. And again, a huge part of those novel entities comes from agriculture and, again, from animal agriculture. Biogeochemical flows, phosphorus and nitrogen, are also a very big problem, because when we overdose those elements, then the soil fertility deteriorates. So again, animal agriculture is the main cause for those problems. Even ocean acidification and stratosphere ozone depletion are linked to animal agriculture, though they are still below this this boundary, this green inside this green circle. And freshwater change on top on the right, you see green water is water that comes down with the rain, with precipitation, and then grows into plants. And when animals eat these plants because they are for animal feed, then this water is bound into the animals and later into the animal products. It's not available for the natural water cycle anymore. So green water, again, is mainly affected by animal agriculture on this planet. Would you please do the next slide? So as you can see, animal agriculture is the leading cause of biodiversity loss, large-scale deforestation, soil degradation, and water depletion, and it's a leading cause of global warming and chemical pollution. So we need to address animal agriculture as soon as possible, because addressing fossil fuels will only tackle global warming, climate change, but not the other vital planetary boundaries. So thank you. I'll pass it on to you, Esben.
Thank you. The climate impact from industrial farming has been absent during the negotiations here in Bonn. Even though that we know that even if we keep fossil fuels in the ground, it will still be impossible to keep temperature rising 1.5 degrees with the current food system. If we don't change the current food system, we will not be able to keep it below 1.5 degrees, even though we stop burning off fossil fuels. So we need to address this issue of factory farming way more than we do at the moment. Meat is the new coal, and plant-based alternatives are the new windmills. In order to show the impact from factory farming, we have made an analysis where we have looked at the 5 biggest pork and chicken producers in the world. On purpose, we haven't looked at the production of beef because the climate impact from beef is already broadly recognized. The meat from pork and chicken is often seen as climate friendly, but it isn't, and our report shows that. Our scorecard identifies the 5 largest chicken and pork producers in the world. You can see them on the screen behind me now. And then we rank them based on their emissions, including the emissions from the feed that we put into these animals. And the climate impact from feed is, as we heard before, one of the major parts of the emissions that come from factory farming. So why have we made this scorecard? I think you can change now. It will give us a deeper understanding of the greenhouse gas emissions from factory farming. We aim to understand and highlight the companies' effects on habitats and on the climate. Many companies have net zero commitments, but do they live up to that? Our key focus is exposing the damage done by animal feed production. So the feed production is key here. And it's important at the moment right now because we have seen a bit focus on it from the IPCC that has recommended a dietary shift as one of the key climate mitigation opportunities, that we start to eat more plant-based instead of animal-based. And how did we do this? To begin with, we identified the 5 biggest meat processing companies using production data in annual reports of companies and consolidated industry reports. We calculated the emissions per kilogram of chicken or pork meat for each company using average country-based emissions data that we made in another report back in 2022, last year. And then we calculated the proportion of overall emissions for each company that animal feed production represents by multiplying the total number of animals slaughtered in 1 year for each company by the average live body weight of the slaughtered animals. The amount of feed necessary to produce 1 kilogram of live body weight and the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in kilograms of CO2 equivalent per unit of feed produced. Then we converted this into to numbers of cars on the road, which shows us that overall, which shows us how much the emission would be if it was cars that was driving around. So when we look at what happens in these 5 companies, it shows us that they slaughter 11.5 billion chickens a year and 150 million pigs every year. That's a lot. That's individual beings, each one of those. For the climate, this is equivalent to 36.4 million fossil fuel cars on the road each year. 36.4 million cars that drives like an average car does. People normally blame the transport industry and tells us to drive electric cars instead of fossil fuel cars, but we still haven't reached the point where we say the same about the food that we eat, that we have to make that more plant-based and less animal-based. It also shows us that JBS is by far the biggest climate culprit when it comes to their pig and chicken production. They have emissions equivalent to 14 million cars on the road each year. This is more than all the cars in New York City and almost 3 times that of the cars in Rio. More than half of the emissions from JBS come from animal feed production, which is also closely linked to deforestation, another problem than climate, where carbon is released when the land is cleared. And what does this mean for the UNFCCC, where we are here today? It means that agricultural emissions need urgently to be addressed. We need factory farming is a huge component, and that needs to be acknowledged, especially the animal feed. We need to change the food systems into a more humane and sustainable food system. We need a moratorium on factory farming, so we don't start new factory farms up. And when we, or they here at the UNFCCC, discuss all the finance flows and how to get the finance investments away from fossil fuels, they should also remember how to get the finance investments away from industrial farming. And the governments, we would also like the governments to do something. We would also like the governments to acknowledge the environmental footprint of factory farming. We want the governments to tighten regulations on deforestation in imports, strengthen animal welfare and environmental regulations. We want the governments to encourage the citizens to change to plant-based diets, and we want them to catalyze the reduction of meat consumption and a just protein transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Espen. Those are truly unimaginable numbers, especially when you think about the suffering behind this. You mentioned the number of individuals, and yeah, I think it's absolutely great work in singling out these eco-criminals. Thank you. So, over to you, Shananin. Before this conference, we talked about poultry giants in your home region. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the impact that these climate and environmental criminals have on indigenous communities all over Latin America?
Yes, thank you. I think it's very important to acknowledge all the scientific data that we have around how food systems, specifically agro-industrial farming of animals, has in the planet, in the planetary boundaries. But also I think we often forget that this is not something that is just a non-sustainable practice, but it's also something that is putting in danger the lives of people and animals and the territories in which indigenous communities and indigenous youth live in, because as Max has said, in my community where I am from, there are a lot of poultry giants, poultry industries that are not only taking the water of an ecosystem that is already fragile, that is the tropical desert of central Mexico, but also are polluting the air we breathe in, are extracting the water that is remaining, are polluting the same water, are basically putting at risk the sovereignty of food systems and ancestral regenerative food systems that exist in my community. And it's also something that is shared among the Latin American region, because food systems and animal farming has been established over a colonial system of how the global north is feeding themselves through the extraction and the exploitation of animals and people and territories in the global south. So we know that, has been said already, that the Amazon is being deforested by these big farming and polluters, but also a lot of communities in the Lacandona jungle in Mexico are experiencing the same, also in the Patagonia in Argentina. So this is something that is being shared among the Latin American region and also other global south region. So it's important that we acknowledge this, that it is not only something that individuals can tackle, it's something that we as society need to change for food systems to be plant-based and food systems to be recovering the ancestral knowledge of indigenous communities and global south communities, because also it is something that is important to acknowledge that a lot of communities in Latin America were originally like plant-based, basically because the process of colonization was the one that brought all these animals that are being farmed now to the global south lands, because indigenous communities had a different way of living, a different way of relating to animals, to earth, and it's something that we need to recover now if we want to regenerate food systems in a way that does not exploit any form of life. So I believe it's something important that in the panels like this, in conversations around food systems, we diversify the conversation and we acknowledge that it's something that does not only affect one people when we choose what to eat or one life, but it's something that is the responsibility of us all, of who are we going to relate to Earth, how are we going to become a different humanity, a different form of arranging life and managing to be all together.
Thank you, Shanani. That was very powerful. I thought, thank you for sharing your insights. And I think it's always staggering when we have this debate about colonialism and the debt of the North to the South, but somehow the food system and especially the destructive role that animal agriculture is playing never gets talked about, or yeah, just very little. So we're happy to take your questions now. Yes.
Hello, my name is Jan Wolf. I'm from Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation. We strongly share your views on this topic, and we've also done a lot of work on it. And I'm just wondering, what's the status of the negotiations here at COP? There, as you know, there's the Sharm el-Sheikh work program on food systems, but my understanding is it's mostly focused on adaptation measures. It's mostly focused on reducing emissions in the agriculture sector, but there does not seem to be any progress on mitigation, especially in the global north when it comes to meat consumption. It seems to be completely not on the agenda as far as I'm aware. And also the COP presidency of the UAE now has a focus on food system for the next COP. So I was wondering if you are aware of any updates in terms of initiatives which are taking place there. Thank you.
Not more than you already say yourself, unfortunately. Well, I agree much with you. It's too absent here.
But there's always the plant-based treaty. Our demands are stop of the expansion of the animal agriculture industry, active transformation of our food systems towards a plant-based food system, and especially reforestation and rewilding of the freed up space. You know, if all the world, if humanity went plant-based, then we could free up 31 million square kilometers. That's the size of the whole continent of Africa. And we could give that back to nature to let carbon sinks grow and let wildlife habitats grow. So, yeah, it would be nice of you to endorse the plant-based treaty. That's an initiative.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's really astounding that we're not even at the point where we have general recognition of the fact that we need a rapid decrease in animal numbers on this planet, and also a general strategy for reduction of meat, global strategy for meat reduction seems very far away still. Any other questions?
Yes, good morning. I'm Stefano Mannaccio from Cobase, and we totally agree with your vision. Today we have organized a side event entitled Vegan Cities. So the vision is the same. One point, during the negotiation, the issue about animals, animal welfare, animal suffering is missed. compared to the strategy of decarbonization. I agree with you when in Europe, for example, we speak about electrical cars. Problem is not the power of cars, are the cars in itself. And the problem is maybe having and push a strong transition, not from cars and electrical cars, but from plant-based society, because this is, and it's still, a meat-oriented society. And this is a paradox because in Europe, meat is cheaper than vegetables in some case, and is incredible. So I would like to share with you the vision. We are signing your treaty. We spoke today with Nilgun, and I hope to make a strong cooperation with your organization, because I think that during the side event and the general atmosphere is better than 10 years ago, when these issues are very missed also during the side event. And the strong linkage between traditional knowledge, because intensive livestock is threatening also traditional knowledge and indigenous people, is threatening animal suffering, unsustainability inside and outside the countryside. So I think we are a part of a good avalanche, and we think, and we hope that in 10 years we can change our big picture in the general idea that from a meat-oriented society in a plant-based society or sustainable society. And so, thank you. I would like to share with you your idea and common views. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have another question, or two actually. I think we have, yeah, like a few more minutes.
Hi, my name is Mei Ling from Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation. I just like to share that in year 2015 in Paris, climate change, actually at that time, not many people talk about food. But if we look at today, that these 2 weeks, there's really a momentum that we can grab the chance. I think as long as we try to attend lots of meetings, no matter it's focusing on adaptation or mitigation, we try to raise up our voice, because that's the meaning why we are here. So as long as the delegation and all other organizations can hear us, and they will pay attention to the importance that they should be accelerate, also not only the agriculture, but also the consumer side. So I think that's the only thing, or at least we are at the correct place and correct moment to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's good to hear that you're hopeful. I'm also hopeful. I think if we can educate the broader public about the benefits of plant-based food systems in prevention, adaptation, as well as mitigation, I think yeah, it certainly becomes a no-brainer at a point. So thank you. We have another question here.
How do you feel about rotational grazing and other more sustainable livestock raising practices? Do you support those, or are you pushing for more of a fully plant-based diet?
The problem is that there's some news out there who proclaim that grazing cows extensively would be good for the climate, and that's because the pasture takes up a little more carbon than if it's grazed intensively. But this effect slows down after a few years, and then it's gone. And mostly people forget to calculate what the cows emit. It's methane. So carbon sinks out of the air and grows into the grass. and the cow like transforms it to a much more potent greenhouse gas. It transforms it to methane. And regarding the tipping points that are imminent, we need to drastically and immediately cut methane emissions. So we are not in for rotational grazing practices or things like that. We need to stop as soon as possible.
Thanks, Tim. Shannoneen and Esben, do you have any final remarks?
Well, yeah, around all that has been said, also thank you for sharing with us. And yeah, I believe that the way forward will be not to exploit anymore like any form of life, because I think that is what has brought us here to this point on climate change. So that's why I think we need like a whole new way to approach to life and food systems as well.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you very much. Are we allowed to? We're done. All right, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and have a nice evening.